So finally we're in May. Thrones of Britannia has been released. Hope you guys are enjoying it so far. And while the Danes are rampaging throughout the Anglo-Saxon countryside, there is another group of death metal Vikings waiting to join in the slaughter. This time on Total War Warhammer 2. It has been almost 9 months in the making, but by the end of May, barring some horrific Tzeentchian twist of fate, Norsca will finally make its long-awaited return from the Eye of Terror, otherwise known as CA's back burner. And I'm excited, because we haven't had substantial new content for the series since the Tomb Kings back in January, and given the stellar job that was done with the Norse last August, they've been one of the most hotly anticipated additions since that point. And with the re-release of Norsca will come the first Lord Pack for Total War Warhammer 2, a new free LC character for presumably the Lizardmen, a host of new changes to the Dwarfs that may or may not include Ungrim Ironfist being moved to Karak Kadrin alongside the Giant Slayers, and hopefully a very comprehensive patch that addresses the needs of many of the underutilized races and finally fixes Shadows, SSAO, and a bunch of the other problems currently plaguing mortal empires, like Beastmen laying waste to everyone and everything in auto-resolve, corruption bombing huge portions of the map with minimal effort. It sounds like a lot to address, and it is, but it has been a really long time coming since we've had a patch, and there are plenty of issues that need addressing. I've made it pretty clear before, I'm not in love with CA's patching system. I think that waiting 4 months to patch a game as successful as this one is just a little bit ridiculous, but regardless, that wait is finally coming to an end. Just remains to be seen how awesome or how disappointing the changelog will actually be. But with the reintroduction of Wulfric the Wanderer, Throg the Troll King, and the glorious pachyderms of the far north, there are some questions. Like, what changes will they actually receive for their debut in Mortal Empires? Well, for one, we know they're getting new monster hunts, one for each of the 4 new races in Total War Warhammer 2. A big scary dino boy, the hell beast of Seepgore, a hydra of Anathrema, and a flame-pooping phoenix. It's good news, but hardly worth its own video. And while a perfectly ported Norsca would be a nice reward in and of itself, given that 6-month delay, I'd like something a little bit more for them. So I'm going to pose a question to you all right now. Should we get an additional content or Lord character for the Norse when they come at the end of May? For me personally, I'm not expecting it, but I would really like something tangible, something substantial added to the race as a gesture to the community. Doesn't mean CA has to do it, doesn't mean I'm going to throw a hissy fit if they don't, but it would be a very nice show of good faith. And with that in mind, the most logical addition to Norsca, a race pack that was already some of the best DLC work they've ever done, would be some new lords to choose from. One of my few complaints with the content that dropped back in August of last year was the fact that you couldn't do a true full monster playthrough with Throg. The second you decided to pick up a second army, you'd have a Marauder Chieftain or Wulfric as your other general. What I felt like was missing was the addition of a monstrous lord type. And given the focus on Skinwolves and Fimir, which are 2 of the most unique monster units in the trilogy thus far, gaining access to a Fimir Warlord or Skinwolf Chieftain would be a really good thing for the race. More monstrous lords in general would really benefit Total War Warhammer. Obviously that includes stuff like the Doom Bulls for Beastmen, but for the Norse, it would allow players to go for a full theme build and use that synergy that comes with a lord that focuses on a particular unit type. And it wouldn't be very hard to implement. The assets are already there, and it would definitely get people very excited. At least for myself, one of the first things I tried to do when I first got early access to the Throg campaign was build a full army of Fimir warriors, and it just didn't quite feel right when I had a Marauder Chieftain leading them into battle. Leave the trolls to the Troll King, give Skinwolves an Ulfjarl, a Skinwolf Werekin Chieftain, and give Fimir one of their own warlords to lead them into battle. I think that'd be really nice. But outside the realm of generic lords, and certainly higher on my list for what I want when Norsca drops, is a new legendary lord in a new start position. I'm gonna tease my own nipples for a second here when I think about how hard I actually advocated for different start positions before even the first game dropped, and how much replayability that's actually added over the course of the series. But thankfully, there is a very nice and lore-friendly location to move a Norscan lord to that would play super differently from any campaign starting near the Sea of Claws. I am, of course, talking about Skeggi, the largest and oldest human settlement in the New World, a start position that just so happens to be in both the Great Vortex and the Mortal Empires campaigns. Now, as we know by this point, Skeggi is a trading and piracy hub that combines the dregs of many different human societies into one mosh pit of violence and betrayal, but by the standards of the Warhammer world, it's not such a bad place. Many of the adventurers who live there are Norscan. It was originally founded by a Norscan, and starting a campaign so close to Hexadal and Lord Mazdamundi would really liven up both campaigns. So while there's no particular lord with super close ties to Skeggi, it is a Norscan trading hub first and foremost, and it is a flavorful, fun location that would add a ton of variety, and if you can justify pretty much any Norscan lord being there pretty easily, it works pretty well for the campaign in general. Now, Throg should stay in Wintertooth, but Wulfric could easily move to Skeggi if it was necessary, or the new legendary lord could move there instead. But the question remains, who should that legendary lord be? Well, there are quite a few characters to choose from, all with varying degrees of difficulty in terms of implementation. Given the fact that one of Norsca's major mechanics is choosing which of the Chaos Gods you want to gain favor with, it stands to reason that a new legendary lord would not be devoted to any particular god. And I don't want any god-aligned lords being stripped out of the Warriors of Chaos army book to come play ball for Norsca, because we can and should expect them to come in Game 3. Which leaves me a little bit torn a bit, because if it's someone like Valkia the Bloody, who we're not guaranteed to see later, although I do think she's likely, I'd rather have her with Norsca than not at all. But she's the kind of character, along with Egrim von Horseman, Village the Curseling, Dakala the Denied One, Festus the Leechlord, all those kind of characters are the kind that would be so much better once we have assets and units for each of the Chaos Gods. Right now, with Chaos Undivided and Norscan rosters being the way they are, they lose a lot of their appeal. So that leaves us with undivided lords and heroes, just like Wulfric and just like Throg. And there's one in particular who has quite possibly become the most meme-worthy character in the history of Total War. A godlike being who could give even Settra the Imperishable a run for his money in terms of his charioteering skills. He is known simply as the Ever-Chariot, Surtha Ek, a deity who is beyond your comprehension, asinine mortal. I'm saying this 100% honestly. He's the kind of lord that would score CA a ton of points with the fans, take minimal effort to implement, and have a very unique campaign playstyle focused on chariot builds. Yes, he is currently a lord for the Varg, but he's a made-up character. He could easily be moved to Skeggi or anywhere else. He's a blank slate when it comes to implementation, and his current model is about as simple as it gets, and he would just be fun to play. He is not my first choice, not by a long shot, I will say that, but when you're talking about a gesture of good faith that would make people happy without being very hard or expensive to develop, he's extremely logical. And trust me when I say, CA knows the Surtha Ek memes quite well by this point, so I think he's got a chance. And he's the kind of guy who starts out by plowing through your infantry, then plowing through your waifu, so I wouldn't be mad if he made it in. But with that said, there are some legitimate characters from the lore who could make it in as well. And near the top of my list would be Lord Mort Kim, the Black Iron Reaver, a true king of the Norscans who battled Valkia the Bloody to a standstill, which is pretty impressive in and of itself, and personifies the Viking raider mentality and sense of brutal honor many Northmen possess. He was a man who retained his own individuality and desires while gaining the blessings of each of the 4 Chaos Gods, and it was he who battled through the Chaos Waste before marching on Ostland and razing many of its cities to the ground. He killed a powerful cabal of Nurgle sorcerers, gaining the attention of the Poxfather, bound an ancient dragon to his will, earning the favor of Tzeentch, and wrestled a 2-headed giant to the ground with nothing but his bare hands. And the fact that he gained the favor of each dark god fits perfectly with the main campaign mechanics of the Norscans, which allow the player to build a deeper relationship with the ruinous powers depending on whichever bonuses you want. And really the only issue I can see with his inclusion is the fact that he rides a juggernaut of Khorne into battle. And I really don't see CA creating that model before Game 3 simply because Skull Crushers and Blood Crushers will be a pretty big selling point. They're amongst the most iconic mounts in all of Warhammer Fantasy, and I'm pretty sure CA is going to want to hang on to those. Now, Bjorg Bearstruck is another cool champion of Norsca, certainly more difficult to implement than Mort Kim or Surtha Ek. He's actually a werebear, the only one of the bearmen of Urslo who can fully transform into a grizzly. His backstory isn't incredibly interesting, but he would have a chance for a pretty badass-looking model and a focus on skin wolves in campaign. Now at this point, we know that transformation spells aren't going to be a thing in the trilogy. We know that Transformation of Kadan doesn't turn your caster into a manticore, they just summon it from the ground. So if CA decided to tackle him as a legendary character, we'd probably be seeing him as a Chaos Lord or a Marauder Chieftain, hybrid kind of looking guy with bear-like mutations rather than a full bear that can actually transform in battle. So we'd have a lot of fur, have some vicious looking bear claws and maybe an elongated snout, but it would still be mostly Chaos Lord looking in terms of an actual character. Don't think he's that likely, but he would be a pretty cool addition, and he's kind of from the old Hammer style of Warhammer Fantasy, or at least from Storm of Chaos. So, I don't know. I would like to see him. I don't think he's super likely, though. And then we've got Sail the Faithless, Twisted Seer of the Waste, a character from Tamarkan Throne of Chaos, which is actually the same army book that the Chaos Dwarfs came from, and he's not actually Norscan, but is rather from a Kurgan tribe, who nevertheless exemplifies the worship of Chaos Undivided, albeit in a very different way than Lord Mort Kim. With Mort Kim, there is that sense of brutal pride and honor, but for Sail, well, he's called Faithless for a reason. He shows off quite a bit of the Tzeentchian aspects in that he does everything that is completely self-serving. There's nothing that is ever outward or noble in his qualities whatsoever. Lots of other Norscans have those qualities, lots of other Kurgan do. Maybe not lots, some of them do. He's not one of them. Every promise and bargain he's ever made is broken to further his own ambitions. And he's a Sorcerer Lord with the Lore of Shadow or Lore of Heaven, so he'd have 3 spells from each. He can damage his own allies to prevent miscasting, and he'd provide a very nice change of pace from Wulfric or Throg as a magic-focused campaign. He also has his own pet Chaos Spawn, the Nightmaw, which could be given a head nod pretty easily by just including it as a part of his unique starting units in his campaign. And of course, there are plenty of others as well. We've got Vardek Krom, kind of a fan favorite there. He's the Herald of Archaon. We've got Egil Styrbjorn of the Scaling Tribe, a Norscan High Jarl of Khorne, who would make a ton of sense, honestly, except for the fact that there are basically no Khornate assets in the game whatsoever currently. But that doesn't stop our boy Skeggi from making it in, so it's kind of hard to know. They could decide to go that way anyway. And there are a lot of other cool characters who would provide a very different campaign experience from the lords we have currently, and especially starting in Skeggi, the old stomping grounds of Lost Eriksson. They'd be a lot of fun to play. So I personally would like CA to go out on a limb there and add an extra legendary lord for Norsca. And obviously, it's not exactly a brave stance to take. It's not like I'm going to turn down free content additions, but still, it's worth asking because I'm sure not everyone is going to feel the same way. Would you like to see a 3rd legendary lord launch alongside Norsca at the end of May? And if so, who would you want it to be? No matter what happens, I'm sincerely hoping this coming patch will make up for all the delays and put Mortal Empires and Norsca in a fantastic state, but I guess we will find out soon enough, and I will be right there to cover it. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you next time. Indie Pride, signing out for now.